first time I heard about Bigfoot was when I took my younger brother and a friend of his to see The Legend of Boggy Creek. It was playing at the drive-in where we lived. My interest in the subject was renewed years later when my son and I started watching the Finding Bigfoot series together. It made me think back to my childhood living in the country. My family moved to a small town in southern Indiana when I was little. I was a bit of a tomboy and I loved going to the woods by myself just to enjoy nature. We had a couple of horses in the pasture way back in the woods, and I would sometimes go to pet and hand feed them. And on occasion, I would suddenly feel afraid, as if someone or something menacing was watching me. When I gave in to the urge to run home as fast as I could hear the sounds of twigs snapping behind me. I thought a bear was coming after me. And at that age, I didn't realize there were no bears in Indiana. I live in Ohio now, and one evening I was taking my granddaughter on a ride in the country. She loves it as much as I do, and we would point to houses that we liked and enjoy each other's company. She's also a horse lover and loved seeing them in the fields as we drove. I was driving around, not even sure where we were at the time, when I started to turn onto a gravel road with trees lining both sides of it. It was right at dark, and the road was dark, and right before I turned, we saw a dark shape in the middle of the road. It looked like it was an animal hunched down, and it was eating something it had caught. Even at a distance, we could tell it was huge, but it was too dark to tell what it was. My granddaughter got scared and rolled up her window. She closed the sunroof and she begged me not to get any closer to it. I drove on, not knowing what it was and not wanting to make her more upset than she had already become. And then to my surprise, out of nowhere, I got scared too. It was like a light switch had turned on, and I felt the familiar feeling of fear that I had felt as a child in the woods by myself. Like something was after me, and I had to get out of there as fast as I could. It took both of us a while to calm down, and though I've always wondered what that dark shape was, part of me is grateful that I never found out. Oh, that's spooky. You don't know what you saw, but you saw something dark hunched over. Could it have been a bear? Yes. But you had a good gut feeling about it. I would trust my gut feeling on it. You think you know what it is? I'd stay with that. If nothing else, that'll keep you alert when you go to the woods for the rest of your life. This was a good story. Thank you, ma'am, for sending it. All right. Thanks for clicking on the video. I have 4, they're 3 to 5 minute stories. And then I've got 2 really good archived stories that will come after that. I think one of them is almost 30 minutes long, but it's a really good one. So I hope you all enjoy this video. Thanks for clicking on the video. All right, here we go. In 2019, I was in East Tennessee staying in a camper. The owner of the property lived in a mobile home nearby and had dogs chained up in different parts of the yard, with dog houses nearby for shelter. On my first night there, I heard a loud slap at the far end of the camper. It was so loud that it shook the entire structure, and it felt eerily deliberate, as if something was trying to startle me into the open, the way a loud noise can scare chickens out of the coop. A week later, I had been in town grocery shopping with my neighbors. By the time we got back, it was dark. And just when I finished putting things up, I shit you not, I heard a loud and clear whistle outside the door. I thought I might have forgotten a bag, so I called my neighbors on the phone, but it wasn't them, and they hadn't heard anything. Well, another week went by, and then at 3 a.m, a growl by the front door woke me up. I grabbed my knife and I eased up toward the door to peek outside, and that thing growled again, this time near the top of the door. The door was at least 8 feet tall. There was no local animal I could think of that could stand that tall, and it startled me so bad that I jumped back. I mustered a rebel yell as loud as I could, and I heard it run away from the door on 2 feet. I stopped staying in the camper after that. 3 weeks later, the homeowner's son came home from the National Guard. He had been on duty. We were all getting ready for bed when his girlfriend said she saw eyes shine outside. I told her it was probably just lightning bugs, but I joined her at the window and I looked outside with her. We focused in on a set of eyes that I thought were lightning bugs, and then they blinked. It was two sets of eyes standing 8 feet tall right outside the window, looking in. The son grabbed his gun and flashlight, but as soon as he went out the door, the eyes disappeared. And that's the end of that story. And at first I was thinking, who has a door that's 8 feet tall? But if he's in a camper and it's up on its wheels, it could be 8, 9, could be taller than 8 feet, I guess. This was interesting. This guy he's in East Tennessee in his camper. A lot of people have encounters while they're in their campers out in national parks and such. But this was a good story, man. I appreciate you sending it. Thank you, sir. Many moons ago, on the Glover River in McCurtain County, Oklahoma, my grandparents were at a fishing spot they call the Big Hole. They were busy catfishing when they heard a yell from up the river. For the fun of it, my grandma decided to mimic the sound, and she yelled right back. Not long after, they heard a huge splashing coming up the river, as if a large animal were coming quickly. As the splashing sound got closer, they started feeling uneasy and decided to pack up and leave. My grandmother went ahead to the truck to start it up so that they could get out of there faster, and she heard some leaves rustling in the woods next to her. She rejoined my grandfather to help with packing, and once they got everything loaded up, they saw this huge shadow in the trees. They didn't wait around to find out what it was, and they got out of Dodge. She's told me this story many times throughout my life, and I've always figured it was Bigfoot, but I never paid any mind to what the yell could have been until this weekend when I visited them and I played the Ohio Howl recording. I had gotten her attention, and she called my grandfather over so he could hear it too. My grandparents both said it was just like the sound they heard that day that they were fishing at the Big Hole. Little did they know at the time, they had a near encounter with Bigfoot. Oh, that's awesome. A lot of people write in and they listen to these stories or they watch other channels or whatever. They get some information on these creatures and they start remembering back on things that they've never been able to figure out, and they're able to put two and two together and come up with, hey, must have been Bigfoot. It's perfectly logical. I mean, it could be anything. Why not blame it on Bigfoot? That's just my take on it. But this was really good. Kind of a spooky story, secondhand story. I thought it was great. Thanks to the writer. All right, here's a story that I think is from Australia. My editor says it's about yowies and ghosts. Around 2017, I was pregnant with my fourth child. We had been on a walk going through an unused train tunnel, and I wasn't feeling too good. My husband went with the two bigger kids to get the car, and I was holding the youngest in my arms. I had gotten back to the road and was standing off to the side waiting for my husband when something made me look up. In the trees about 2 meters from the road was a giant humanoid creature just standing there watching me. I knew not to turn my back on it, and I stood there terrified, and I faced it. I was there for 5 minutes in a standoff with this thing before I started moving away, stepping back slowly, all the while watching this thing watch me. When my husband showed up in the car, it backed up, and it retreated into the trees. I was hysterical at that point. I loaded my daughter into her seat, and I told my husband there was something in the trees watching me. I made him slide over to the passenger seat, and I locked all the doors, and I got us out of there as fast as the car would go. My husband believed me, and at every chance he got, he told me to share with others that time that I saw a yowie. All my life, I've had paranormal experiences, from shadows turning the lights on in my room to doors opening and closing on their own, the TV turning itself on, and mysterious footsteps at all hours of the day and night. I've had visits from the Hat Man and have even seen objects thrown through the air, seemingly on their own volition. One day my husband was mowing the yard and I was the only one in the house. I heard someone walking outside and I watched my husband go into our bedroom. I started talking to him when, behind me, my husband asked who I was talking to. I looked from him to the bedroom and asked how on earth he had gotten there. I told him I had just seen him go in the bedroom, and he promptly searched the house for an intruder. When we visited family, I did a final check of the house while my husband loaded the kids in the car. And as I walked around, I always felt like someone was there doing the walk around with me. As soon as I went out the door, I would feel someone pat my bum as if to say, "It's all good, love. I'll keep an eye on the place for you." My husband and I love historical tours. One time we visited the grave of a captain who was involved in a boat sinking in the Brisbane River. The tour guide told us all about the deaths involved and how it was the captain's fault, when suddenly I heard very clearly in my ear again and again a voice telling me it wasn't my fault. I told my husband what I had heard and the tour guide went silent. I wasn't trying to undermine his tour, but the look on his face was priceless. Now, I've had many strange experiences in my life, and I found that sometimes the best thing to do is to keep the stories to myself. Even those with the biggest hearts have a hard time relating. And that's the end of her story. And I would say that last paragraph, you can keep them to yourself if you want, or you can send them to us so that we can all enjoy them. I thought there's several incidents in this email, and it's very concisely explained. She just deals with the strange events, and I thought it was great. And if this writer, I don't know when she sent it probably a while back, but if you hear this, send us some more. Man, you're a good writer, and you really explain your experience as well. Thank you, ma'am, for sending this. I thought it was a great set of stories. Thanks again. All right, the next two stories are archive stories. In fairness, I'm announcing that every time I do a podcast with archive stories. Hope you guys enjoy them. All right, let's get into it. Here we go. Here's an email from Alabama. Man writes, many years ago, I worked as a chemical operator at a company near the airport close to Huntsville, Alabama. I was scheduled to work the third shift. Having extra time on my hands before work, just before dusk, I went down to the swamp that I knew had some good bass and bluegill. I wanted to try out some new fishing baits. I was standing near the edge of the road in the swamp casting my baits out when I heard a large tree snap and a crash near the back of the swamp. My first thought was that if a tree falls in the woods and nobody sees it, does it make a sound? Yes, they do make a sound. I had to laugh at myself for even thinking of that, but that's where my mind had gone. 2 minutes later, another tree snapped in the same area. At this point, I had stopped fishing. My attention had been drawn elsewhere. I began walking the edge between the road and the swamp to get a better look at the woods. As far as I could see, there wasn't anyone or anything around. The sun was beginning to set, therefore it was getting dark in the woods, and then I heard something running toward me. And it sounded like a small animal, which was nothing unusual, so it didn't bother me. And then scrambling out of a thicket in the woods was a red fox running right at me. And it passed me by 2 feet, which is very unusual. Foxes tend to avoid people. Many people were on their way home from work. There was a lot of traffic, but that fox never even hesitated as it crossed the road in front of me. It was obvious that something bigger had it running for its life. I turned back toward the part of the woods where the fox had come from, and I could smell what was chasing it. The smell was horrendous, as if a wet, dead goat had been out in the hot summer sun for at least a week. And then an eerie feeling landed on me like a ton of bricks. It told me in no uncertain terms that I needed to make tracks and get the hell out of there. And that's exactly what I did. To this day, I have never gone back in the woods to investigate what made that ungodly smell. and it gave me that hellish feeling of dread. I know foxes don't normally run toward people, but this one was so terrified that it was on the run for its life and it didn't care about anything except living another day. I never saw a Bigfoot. However, I've never seen a panther either, but I'm sure panthers are as real as I am, so then why not Bigfoot? 2 trees snapping, a fox running for its life, and that horrible smell, plus that feeling of dread were not just coincidences. It's too much for me not to investigate, so this fall, I'm prepared to do so. I'm going back into the woods to find out what I didn't see that day. Like the falling trees, I didn't see them, but I know they were there. This is a true story. All names have been changed. Place names and dates remain factual. The place. Main roads, the state highways, and large county roads make little concession to the northern Indiana prairie. They zip north, south, or east-west across the sun-sparkle land. On smaller local roads, you feel the contour of the terrain, the gentle swell and dip past innumerable kettle lakes, the drainage ditches, and the creeks that vein this country. You smell the lush, loamy soil, but above all, the ever-changing sky. This is a rich country, and people have lived here for thousands of years. At a creek rock bar, you may be surprised how easy it is to find Indian arrowheads and pieces of pottery. The archaic and woodland people settled here after the last glacier retreated 15,000 years ago. Glacial melts left behind moraines, lakes, and the lazy, meandering Kankakee River Basin with its chaotic 500,000-acre wet woodland known as the Great Kankakee Marsh. Around the time of Christ, the Miami and the Potawatomi Indians settled this area. The Manitou protected their dark forests. At night, the spirits of men hunted the spirits of animals. The Myline demons dwelt under the earth. The first white men here were French voyagers intent on fur harvest. They left behind only place names like La Crosse, La Porte, and La Paz. Later, real settlers, American sodbusters, began the epic transformation of the Midwest wilderness into the agricultural heartland of the continent. The Potawatomi were driven out in the 1830s. The Grand Marsh resisted the plow for hundreds of years. Too wet to cultivate, too thick to navigate, the marsh and the woodlands sang with life. This was the largest inland wetland in North America. It was a paradise for waterfowl, and hunting flourished. Early railroads lay down short sidings, as Hoosier guides pulled gentlemen hunters from Chicago into the swamp. A barrel anchored in the marsh grass allowed them to wait snug for the waterfowl. At the end of the day's shooting, the sportsman could repair to the luxury of the railcar sleeper. And so the slaughter began. Hunters shot away the deer and drove away the last of the eastern bison. Trappers cleaned out the beaver, mink, marten, and other fur bearers. Change accelerated in the 1880s when flat-bottom steam dredges bulled in and their iron jaws gnawed away at the Kankakee wetlands. The Grand Marsh, once so vast, was reduced to some pitiful holdings, and the land lay stripped. Now farmers could begin cultivating fields of corn and soybeans. Mint thrived in the rich, mucky soil. On muggy summer nights, the aroma drowned the land. These families built America. The food prices plummeted with the bounty grown in the Midwest Eden. Corn and pork from Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois fed America. Little towns thrived, built around the railroads and grain elevators. It was a good time, although a hard one. Getting your back into the work was an accepted part of life. And while the mechanization enabled the farms to grow, farm work was never done. It follows a seasonal rhythm of tillage, planting, and harvest. and in winter there were animals to tend to and equipment to repair. The Man. Russell Schaefer was born here in 1901. Scion of the region's old farm families, it was a big outfit, and Schaefer was a respected man in this community. While he was known as Russ to most, his family and close friends called him Boots. He was nicknamed as a toddler when he would climb into his daddy's waders and clomp about the farmyard. The Schaefer family had been on this land for generations and were known, like their German forebearers, for self-reliance, thrift, decency, and common sense. Russ's grandfather, Erwin Schaefer, had built the immense bank barn in 1880. Russell's father, Ivan, had taken over after his grandfather was gone, and now, with his passing, the farm belonged to Russ. Family was everything to the Schaefers, and Russ planned that one day his son, Rob, would take over for him. He and Jessie were thankful their girls, Kim and Marilyn, had married local men, and their grandkids were close. He kept a brown pony called Dot for them to ride. Saturday, August 27, 1960. Saturday dawned clear and cool. It was a golden late August day. Labor Day would be the following weekend, and Jessie Schaefer drove the pickup truck to Bass Lake to take her widowed sister some blueberries and sweet corn. Alice Bach traded with Jessie for garden greens, tomatoes, and peppers. They talked about children and grandchildren, and on her drive back home, Jessie gassed up at Coffin's Corner Market outside Knox and bought 2 salt blocks. A boy loaded them into the pickup truck's bed. Russell Schaefer spent the morning repairing a power takeoff unit and then repairing a drawbar and caring for his animals. It was a clear, warm day, and he was looking forward to sitting in the shade with a tall glass of lemonade before supper. Early that evening, Jessie Schaefer called her husband into their meal of chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, and green beans. There was coffee and freshly baked blueberry pie for dessert. Schaefer finished his pie and ice cream. He swigged the last bit of his coffee, folded his napkin, and pushed himself away from the table. It was dusk, and the cool of the day had descended. It was a good time to be alive. He told Jessie that he was going to take the salt out to the Black Angus cattle herd. He would be back in time to help her wash dishes. Schaefer walked out to the truck parked under the trees and held the door as his dog Tarzan jumped in. He drove away from the house, and he was never seen again. The Search. The Stark County Sheriff Department logged a call from a distraught Rob Schaefer at 11:15 that night. Schaefer reported finding his father's truck abandoned and was unable to locate his father on their large farm. His mother was frantic and insisted he call. Dispatch directed the deputy to the scene and then radioed the senior deputy, who, having just broken up a dust-up at a dance at English Lake, had monitored the radio traffic and assigned himself to assist. On his drive out to the Schaefer farm, Deputy Sheriff William Rudd mentally cataloged what he recalled of Russell Schaefer. He was a churchgoer, probably in his late 50s, married with 3 adult children. Schaefer was of average height, 5'10" he guessed. He was heavy-set, not a smoker, probably not much of a drinker aside from an occasional beer at the American Legion or the VFW. Most of these farmers were like that. Did he wear glasses? Rudd thought so. Schaefer seemed like any other prosperous local farmer, plain, modest, perhaps even gruff, but truthful and honest. Not the impulsive type. You do what you can and you bear what you must. A needle in a stack of needles. Schaefer was renowned, if renowned was the right word for it around here, for having bought a new 1947 Indian motorcycle. People said it was the only foolish thing the man had ever done. Some might dismiss Bill Rudd as a Stark County hill rat, but that would be a mistake. Rudd had a keen, inquiring mind. He was a veteran of the fierce world of death. He had served in a signal unit of the 45th Infantry Division during World War II, all the way from the landing at Salerno in Italy to Anzio beachhead, and then the invasion in southern France. Finally, the 45th had clawed its way into Germany and liberated Dachau concentration camp. Rudd had seen and done things no man should have to see or do. He had seen every variety of horror and human frailty. As a deputy sheriff, he dealt with more mundane matters: petty theft, drunks, fighting at a crossroad tavern, normal ruckuses. The deaths he dealt with now were car crashes and drownings and farm accidents. Murder in Stark County was rare, and from time to time one cheating spouse shot the other. But disappearances like this were exceedingly rare. Rudd was in fact a shrewd judge of character and a diligent deputy sheriff. It was a well-known fact, if unsaid, that Rudd ran the county law department while Sheriff Boone Miller cruised toward retirement. Rudd was accustomed to being underestimated, and he used that to his advantage as deputy sheriff. Now at midnight, he was speeding to the Schaefer farm on County Road 800 West. No one called it 800 West. To the locals, it was Schaefer Road. Rudd pulled into the long drive that bisected a field of wax beans. A mounted light fixture provided illumination. On his left was the Schaefer home, a handsome prairie dwelling. Somewhere inside, a dog was barking. And on his right was an old bank barn probably built in the last century. Next to it was a modern pole structure with an attached machine shed with a large open lot sheltering an Alice Chambers tractor. Behind that, a stand of walnut trees, and in front of that, a disused corn crib and freshly whitewashed henhouse. Another open lot held a station wagon, and behind that grew a tangle of trees. He was on a dark farm track passing a cattle enclosure. Rudd could just see the Angus cattle bunched up defensively near the barn, and ahead were towering fields of corn. He concentrated on the rutted track. He had never been on this property before, though he had flown over it and had a fairly good idea of the layout. Dry weeds swished and crackled under the vehicle's weight. In the distance, Rudd could make out a sputtering red road flare, and he headed toward it. At the end of the path, he pulled up and found Deputy Richard Young. He opened his cruiser door. "Bill," Young said. "Rich, what have you got?" He could see Young's cruiser parked a short distance away, and near it a pickup truck. "We got Russell Schaefer," Young answered flatly. "Wife says he left the house at dusk to check his cattle. He didn't return. She called the son who found this." Young motioned toward the truck. "Okay," Rudd answered. "Let's start with that." They walked over to the truck. "Is Rod Schaefer here?" Young motioned toward the dark west. "He's down there in the creek looking for his dad." Moonlight bathed the landscape in an unnatural cold brilliance. It was very quiet, oddly still, thought Rudd. August's crushing insect drone was strangely silent. They approached Schaefer's Ford truck parked uphill from the creek. The driver door was open, and Rudd leaned in with his flashlight, and the key was in the ignition. The state registration strapped to the sun visor. He could make out a Remington 870 in the small space behind the bench seat. On the floorboard, next to the shotgun, was an unopened box of buckshot. Rudd ducked back out of the truck. In the weeds, just below the truck's rocker panel, lay a dented flashlight. In the silvery moonlight, its plastic lens cover shone like an open eye. There was a muted air of menace about the whole scene. Rudd, Young, and the Schaefer boy moved out and apart and began their search. Deputies Rudd and Young swung their county-issued 9-volt flashlights slowly from side to side. They called out for Schaefer. Rob Schaefer carried a battered Coleman lantern. "Dad!" he implored. "Dad!" The lantern soon dimmed and then died. In his haste, Rob had forgotten to fuel it. He was frustrated. Somewhere in the dark to the northwest, an owl called. The quiet wind brought a whiff of something tangy and foul. The search party of 3 patrolled north, east, and then south until they ran up against the weed-choked creek bank. They found nothing. The dark land was too vast and the searchers too few. Rudd turned to Young. "Any helpful thoughts here, Rich?" Young shook his head. In the night, it was too dark to find anything. Moreover, they were trampling the scene. Rudd, as a senior deputy, decided to wait for dawn and a larger search party. They were accomplishing nothing here. There was a heaviness about the air. It was cold now. Young zipped his jacket tighter. Rudd felt an uneasy tingle of being watched. You could see everything in the moonlight, and yet you could see nothing. And he turned to Young. "You ready to get out of here?" Rudd asked Young to stay on the scene. Young was accustomed to that. It was standing operating procedure. He lit a cigarette as he watched Rudd's cruiser pull away. The next morning, Sheriff Miller, Deputy Rudd, and the county search and rescue volunteers returned shortly after first light to begin a systematic canvass of the area. For a Sunday morning, it was a respectable turnout. 17 men tumbled out of their 4 vehicles, some laughing, some grim, some stubbing out the last cigarettes before beginning their search. Miller handed Young breakfast in a bag with a plastic cup of coffee, and Rudd handed Young a roll of toilet paper. Young grinned. "You're too late with that," he said. To himself, Rudd decided that Schaefer had had a stroke or a heart attack. Confused and disoriented, he had staggered off. He would be found in an adjacent field or the nearby creek, and he might still be alive. Miller glumly agreed with his deputy, though neither wanted to say so to a heart-racked Jesse Schaefer. Miller addressed the search and rescue volunteers and told them the purpose of the search, and then Rudd split them up into teams and assigned search quadrants. They fanned out. It was a long morning, wading through the cornfields and searching by the creek. By noon, the sun was hot. Search and rescue had turned up nothing. After a fast lunch, the search area was extended to the opposite side of the creek. An hour into the expanded search, Blaine Smith yelled. Uphill from the creek, he'd found a pair of broken steel-frame glasses. Rob Schaefer confirmed they belonged to his father, but nothing else was found. It was puzzling and frustrating. Rudd thought, sick people, injured people don't go uphill. It just doesn't happen. Rudd now doubted this was a medical emergency. The search continued, and buoyed by finding the glasses, optimism flared that Schaefer would be found. But that didn't happen. All the rest of that day, nothing more was found. Search and rescue scoured for another day, still nothing. Rudd shrugged it off and arranged for Boy Scout Troop 186 to join the search. It was as if Schaefer had vanished into a thin mist. By now, the Schaefer case was local and state news. Volunteers made sporadic searches. A week went by, and then another, and then a month passed, and the search was suspended. Hope faded and finally died. The Schaefer case became a curiosity, and then it was forgotten. It was now the second week of October. "It's one hell of a thing, Bill. I've never had a stone-cold whodunit." Boone Miller sat across the office desk from Rudd. Miller had been Stark County Sheriff for 19 years, though he had been a county lawman for many more. He had never had a missing person case like this before. From time to time, teen runaways might take off for a romp in Chicago. It was rare, but they always returned to shocked and disapproving parents. Miller told Rudd he could recall only one similar case. In LaPorte County during the war, a timber cruiser had been working north and west of 5 lakes and had utterly vanished. Miller didn't know if that case had ever been cleared. No, he told Rudd, they never found the guy. There's big woods up there. Well, there used to be. He and his brother ran a sawmill. Howes was the name. The lumberyard's still in the family. They dismissed the notion that Schaefer had been kidnapped. The circumstances didn't fit. Moreover, there had been no ransom contact. Schaefer was not the type to just take off. Miller quietly snorted. No, he wouldn't do that. It's not like we made a hash of this. We've just got no way forward, Bill. With the investigation at a standstill, it was time to inform the family that the official investigation had ended. Rudd volunteered to do that. He met Rob Schaefer for breakfast at Sissy's Cafe in downtown Knox. Rob Schaefer took the news well. It was what he expected. There's just a few things, Rob, Rudd said. Did your dad always carry a gun in his truck? No, that's unusual for him, Rob sipped his coffee. But things have been happening that kind of spooked him. Rudd raised a quizzical eyebrow. Well, it was little things. Someone broke into the barn a couple of times. Dad didn't like that. At first, we thought it was just kids. He put up a locking bar and a Yale lock on it. That got broke. Tools came up missing, stuff moved. The cattle were acting weird and other stuff. It wasn't just us. Talked to Bud Kreidler. He had some things going on as well. Anyway, Dad began taking precautions. Well, what about the dog? Rudd said. Tarzan? That dog accompanied Dad everywhere. That's what really scared my mother. She knew Dad had taken him along, so when he ran up on the porch, she knew something was wrong. That dog never begged to be let in, never. And Betty, the house dog, she was barking like crazy. Tarzan? Why'd you call him that? Rudd asked. Schaefer sighed. He had a funny bark when he was a pup. My sister Kim called him that. Rudd and Schaefer talked for a while, and soon Bill Rudd was called to break up a dispute over a property line, and Rob Schaefer sat alone in the diner staring out the window. Oblivion. How does a man disappear into oblivion? How can he leave his supper table, drive a short distance in sight of the home he just left, and simply disappear? Schaefer saw or heard something. It was dusk, and the August light was failing. What did he see? What did he hear? The man drives a half a mile down a beat-up farm track. He knows his path and the land surrounding it as well as he knows every pore in his wife's high cheekbones and her clean, sweet lips. This stoic has lived on this land longer than he has been married to his wife. In this land of grace, how is it that Russell Schaefer faced only retribution? How is it that he stepped into oblivion? Aftermath. The Russell Schaefer case never cleared. Nothing more was found. For a few years, people remarked on it, and then, as is the way of all things, it was forgotten. It became a slim file in a 3-drawer cabinet. Once or twice, someone would pull the file out and read through it. With nothing to add, it was put back. Boom Miller hung on and remained county sheriff until 1972. Bill Rudd got tired of waiting, got tired of police work, and got tired of a community where everyone knew everyone else's business. He began night courses at the local college and got his law degree, specializing in criminal law. He was hired by a legal firm in South Bend. There's always good work for a good criminal attorney in South Bend. Later, he was recruited by a larger firm in Indianapolis and practiced there until he retired in 1998. He and his wife Doris moved to Panama City, Florida. I interviewed him there a few years before he passed away in 2016. Rudd remembered the Schaefer case. It was a strange one. We never uncovered anything on that case, he said. We never cleared it. We never came close to clearing it. I always hoped that someday a body would be found, at least something, and if that didn't solve the mystery, at least it would provide some solace and some comfort to that family. People around there just don't disappear like that. You know, the Schaefer place fell apart after Russell disappeared. The son couldn't run it, and they eventually sold out to ConAgra. The fine house and all the outbuildings are gone. It's like the way of life disappeared with Schaefer. It's run as a factory farm now. Rudd paused. You know, we've seen things, Doris and I. We've been places. Our son met and married a Peruvian girl he met at Purdue. His father-in-law convinced Paul to move down there and do an inventory control on his fishing business in Lima. It's quite a wealthy family. We visit Paul, Marina, and our grandchildren down there. It's a beautiful country. Wonderful food, Lima, Calo, Machu Picchu. I've talked to the Peruvians we've met. Some of them are Amazon people. I told them about the Schaefer case, and they told me they have similar disappearances down there in the jungle. They blame it on sorcerers or even monsters. Some of them say maybe the land took your man. Bill Rudd chuckled. Most of them have a lot of Indian blood, you know. They believe in some powerful juju. In Peru, there's still a lot of belief in magic and the supernatural. Rudd paused again. I don't know. Maybe it's as good an answer as any. This story was written for Blanche, Bernice, and Alice. The author is Gerald Gustafson, written in August 2021. Once again, thank you for joining me on this video and this podcast. I certainly appreciate it, and we will see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.